Discover the incredible 7 surprising secrets to overcome stress and transform your life forever. Sarah Mitchell could hardly remember the last time her heart felt light. Each morning, she rose with the sun's faint glow creeping through the kitchen window, ready to face her classroom of eager young faces. But the laughter of her students barely masked the anxiety gnawing at her spirit, and the weight of the recent economic downturn made day-to-day living feel like an uphill battle. With mounting bills and her husband Michael, a once proud provider, drowning in the suffocating grip of unemployment, the strain in their home echoed through the halls. She found herself pouring everything she had into her students, filling their lives with hope while her own flickered dimly. One dreary evening, as she rummaged through dusty boxes in the attic seeking solace, she stumbled upon her grandmother's journals. The leather binding cracked open with a whisper, revealing pages filled with nurturing words and stories of resilience. Sarah felt hypnotized by her grandmother's wisdom, her heart swelling with hope. Her grandmother's trials mirrored her own, yet each tale carried a glimmer of strength that enthralled Sarah like a rebirth of spirit amidst the darkness. She clung to the 7 secrets that promised to transform her life. But those secrets felt layered in irony. Sarah watched helplessly as budget cuts began to threaten her cherished school. Just as the blush of newfound strength began to bloom within her, a chilling dread rolled in staff reductions. The thought clawed at her insides, and she fought against despair. How could she brave the storm ahead? Michael passed by in silence, the expression on his face a mixture of resignation and guilt, and she could feel the invisible chasm widening between them. Before she could step back from the abyss, her former mentor, Jenna, reached out. Their reconnection reignited feelings of hope, but it also forced Sarah to confront uncomfortable truths. The gleaming surface of her school hid unsettling biases and inequities within its administration. Each tale Jenna shared struck a chord, awakening a fire in Sarah that had long been muted by fear. The idea of standing up to such injustice filled her with dread and determination. Would she betray her loyalty for a chance to shift the narrative? Tears threatened to spill over as her thoughts spiraled inwards, each one sharper than the last. The pressure bore down on her as she questioned everything. What did it mean to be both a protector of her students and a financial provider for her family? Overwhelmed, she poured her tension onto canvas, strokes of vibrant color releasing the ache she had hidden too long. And just as she began to reclaim her voice through art, Sarah felt the stakes elevate. The impending cuts hung in the air, suffocating her hope. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Caught in a web of chaos, Sarah stood at a crossroads. The reality of her situation pressed against her chest like a vice. The world felt impossibly heavy on her shoulders as she prepared for the school board meeting. Each step toward that conference room raised her heart rate, the walls closing in as the impending decisions loomed like storm clouds. Would she find the courage to confront the inequities threatening her students? Would she risk everything, her job, her family's stability, the fragile peace at home? As she steeled herself for the fight ahead, her pulse quickened in tandem with the swirling uncertainty. What awaited her beyond those doors could change every thread of her life, intertwining her identity with the legacy of her grandmother. As Sarah stood before the imposing school board building, her mind raced through a labyrinth of thoughts, each one more frantic than the last. Self-doubt screamed through her, questioning whether she was prepared for the confrontation that awaited her. Would her voice even matter amidst the cacophony of policy and budgetary concerns? She inhaled deeply, trying to draw on the strength she admired in her grandmother's stories. The meeting hall echoed with the sound of chairs scraping the floor as fellow teachers filed in, the usual camaraderie muted by an air of uncertainty. Every face told a story of similar fears, yet Sarah felt isolated in her resolve. She found a corner seat and pulled out the crumpled page of her grandmother's journal, the words blurring as tears pricked at her eyes. Courage comes from the heart, a line caught her attention. What did that even mean when your heart felt so fragmented? As the meeting commenced, the board members presented grim statistics, outlining the necessary budget cuts that would lead to teacher layoffs. Sarah's heart pounded against her ribcage, each number a nail driving deeper into her resolve to speak. She watched her colleagues whispering strategies, their spirits faltering like flickering candles. Could she be the one to ignite their light again? When called to speak, Sarah rose hesitantly, the spotlight on her feeling both blinding and empowering. As she opened her mouth, the words cascaded forth like a dam breaking, fueled by the weight of her fears. Our students deserve better, she began, her voice trembling but gaining momentum. In our rush to save money, we risk losing the very essence of our mission. These children are not just numbers, they are dreams waiting to flourish. Gradually, her initial trepidation morphed into conviction. The room seemed to sway, and she leaned into the swell of emotion, recounting her grandmother's stories of resilience. The rhythmic pulse of her words resonated within her, a wave of strength rising from the depths of her spirit. Would the board hear her? Would they recognize the humanity behind the statistics? As she spoke, Sarah sensed a shift, her colleague sat taller, eyes widening with newfound determination. When she finished, silence enveloped the room, thick with unprocessed thoughts. The board members exchanged glances, as if contemplating the perspective they had overlooked. But reality came crashing back as the chairperson dismissed her with a curt nod, turning back to the meticulously prepared agenda. The walls felt like they were closing in, and a swell of despair rose within her once more. Had she truly made a difference, or was this simply a fleeting moment of defiance lost to indifference? The meeting trudged on, but Sarah was no longer present, her mind spiraling into dark thoughts about her family's financial state. Michael's silhouette lingered in her mind, his job search a constant reminder of their struggles. Could her newfound strength sustain not just herself but also the man she loved? There was still so much uncertainty ahead. Would the cuts impact their life further? As she left the boardroom, Susan, another teacher, caught up with her, her eyes bright with admiration. "Sarah, you were amazing!" she exclaimed, her words cutting through Sarah's haze of self-doubt. "You've inspired me to stand up, to take action." Sarah felt a spark ignite in her chest. Perhaps she wasn't alone after all, she could pull on the threads of hope, weave them into a fabric of collective action. But how to transform inspiration into tangible change? While navigating through the corridors, Sarah pondered her next steps. If she wanted to protect her students and fight for her job, she needed to organize. Would this be the key to not only preserving her position but also revitalizing the spirit of the teaching community? Burdened with responsibility, she walked to her car, determination flickering within her like the faint glow of sunrise. Little did she know, the next challenge awaited her just around the corner, an opportunity that would test her resolve in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The moment she stepped into her office the next morning would mark the beginning of a new chapter, but would she be able to seize it? The morning sun streamed through the office windows, illuminating the stacks of papers that had become an unwelcome feature of Sarah's workspace. Each report, each statistic, reminded her of the urgent challenges facing her school. As she settled into her chair, the weight of her recent experiences pressed heavily on her. She had spoken up for her students, yet the world outside felt unchanged, indifferent to her pleas. She pulled in a deep breath, fighting back the lingering doubts that curled around her thoughts. Glimmers of hope flickered as memories of the meeting cascaded through her mind. Susan's enthusiastic endorsement echoed in her ears, igniting a flickering flame of determination. But inspiration without direction was mere spark, she needed a plan. Sarah swept the clutter from her desk and pulled out a clean notepad, shaking off reluctance as she prepared to write. First, she needed to assess the landscape. What did her colleagues need to rally around? Their shared concerns were a brew of anxiety and uncertainty, cuts affecting their jobs, the erosion of their programs, and the emotional toll on the students. Sarah's eyes grew focused. She envisioned opening a dialogue, an informal gathering where they could share perspectives, brainstorm solutions, and build a strategy to address these combined fears. It would be a departure from the typical coffee breaks, this time, it would be focused and purposeful. "Let us bring it back to why we're here," she murmured to herself, jotting down initial thoughts. "For our students, for our future." Each word anchored her resolve, like nails driven into wood, firm and unwavering. However, the thought of facing dissent weighed on her. Among them lurked skepticism, colleagues who preferred to hunker down and await the inevitable. Sarah shivered at the prospect of resistance. Confronting it wouldn't be easy, but complacency felt like a poison. More determined than before, she decided that meeting would need structure. Convincing her fellow teachers to embrace action required her to take strides toward being a leader, not just a colleague. She mapped out ideas for guiding questions, strategies for discussion that would elevate their shared mission above mere survival. What were their collective dreams for their students? What sacrifices were they willing to make to protect them? These questions turned like cogs in her mind, setting her resolve in motion. As she glanced toward the teachers' lounge, a small group of fellow teachers huddled, their hushed tones grounding in the common theme of uncertainty. She felt a pull, a need to break free from her self-imposed isolation and dive into the fray. What emerged was a memories cascade, of her grandmother teaching her about community, service, and the power of collective strength. Making a decision, Sarah stood up, smoothing her blouse, her heart racing with anticipation and a hint of trepidation. A surge of adrenaline swept through her as she crossed the threshold into the lounge, feeling like she was stepping into a lion's den. "Can we talk?" she called out, drawing all faces. Silence followed, but it wasn't long before a few teachers straightened their posture, eyes wide and questioning. It wasn't much, but it was an opening, her first stutter towards leadership. "We need to unite." Suddenly, a familiar voice interrupted. "What's the use?" It was Frank, a veteran teacher whose cynicism often cast shadows over positive discussions. In that moment, Sarah felt all eyes shift, their hopes hung in the balance. Would she rise to this challenge, confront his skepticism, and push through? With her heart hammering like a drum, she took a step towards Frank, ready to provide a counterargument that spoke not only to her desire but to the entire teaching community. Today couldn't just mark another casual meet. It had to lay the groundwork for courageous choices and bold discussions. But with lingering questions spinning in her mind, the real test lay ahead. Could Sarah navigate through resistance and emerge as the voice of courage she wished to be? The tension in the room thickened, and every revelation held the potential to reshape her destiny. How would she confront Frank and guide her colleagues toward the light? As the words began to form on her lips, Sarah's journey was about to take a turn she never anticipated, one that might demand her utmost strength. Sarah felt the weight of silence press against her as she faced Frank, her mind racing. Doubt mingled with determination, the very air thickened with the tension of expectation. She stood, poised yet vulnerable, knowing that her next words could either inspire her colleagues or send their shared hopes toppling into despair. What's the use? Frank's words echoed in the silence, cutting sharply through the room. His cynicism hung like a shadow, a reminder of the challenges ahead. Sarah took a breath, reminding herself that this was her moment to push back against the tide of resignation. "It's true that things might seem bleak," she began, meeting Frank's eyes with fierce resolve, "but we owe it to our students to try. We can't just sit back and wait for decisions to be made for us. We need to fight for our vision, for their future." Her voice wavered slightly at first but gained strength as she continued. "If we come together, we can create solutions. We can advocate not only for ourselves but for our students who rely on us." A flicker of interest passed over the faces of her colleagues, eyes shifting attentively between Sarah and Frank. Encouraged, she pressed on, recalling what had driven her into teaching so many years ago. "Each of us entered this profession because we believed in something greater. Remember why we chose to teach, for the moments of breakthrough, for the impact we hope to make." The words resonated, stirring memories within the group of the late-night planning sessions, the triumphs over difficult students, the satisfaction of helping a child understand a concept for the first time. Frank's expression hardened, but Sarah pushed forward, unwavering. "Yes, it's going to take work and commitment. Maybe even sacrifices. But is the small comfort of doing nothing worth the risk of losing what we care about? Isn't that worth fighting for? In facing Frank's challenge, she was confronting more than just his disbelief, she was grappling with her own fears of inadequacy and isolation. Would the camaraderie she remembered from earlier years come back, or had time eroded their once vibrant spirit? To her surprise, another teacher spoke up. Sarah's right. If we've waited for change, we've seen what happens, nothing. We should at least try to guide our path rather than following someone else's. Momentum shifted, and Sarah's heart raced with a mix of exhilaration and surprise. She wasn't just taking a gamble on her ideas, but on the unity of her colleagues' commitment to share a vision. Yet, as conversation flowed, patterns of doubt still flickered at the edges, most notably from Frank, who crossed his arms, skepticism radiating from every fiber of his being. "Talk is cheap," he shot back, his voice firm. "What makes you think this will lead anywhere? Those in power aren't interested in what we think." With every doubt Frank hurled, Sarah felt her resolve solidify like tempered steel. Here was the crucible she had needed, the crucible of doubt and dissent. She realized she had to stand firmly, armed with rationale and the undeniable passion of purpose. "It's precisely because they may not care that we must start speaking louder," she said, her voice gaining clarity. "We must forge clarity amid chaos and be the voice for those who feel voiceless. Rather than being paralyzed, we have the ability to change the narrative." Cheers of affirmation erupted from the group, but they were tempered by the lingering disbelief that echoed from Frank. Sarah recognized that this was only a beginning. Turning her focus toward the collective, she urged her colleagues to express their fears and ideas, guiding the dialogue to foster trust and collaboration. As they discussed strategies to gather support and express their concerns to the administration, Sarah felt the first real flickers of possibility ignite. But beneath that excitement lay unease, the ever-present weight of Frank's doubt and the questions still swirling in her mind. Could they really shift the tides? And if they did manage to rally, what formidable obstacles lay ahead with the administration? With one last glance at Frank, Sarah sensed the challenge would return, the confrontation would sharpen, and the strength of her resolve was about to be tested again. The time would come to not only lead but to confront the constructs that limited them. How could she turn the tides against an administration seemingly indifferent? The stakes now felt higher than ever. Would she find the courage to navigate this complex maze, or would she falter when it mattered most? The days that followed the meeting were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah was determined to solidify the momentum she had ignited. Each morning, she arrived early, the weight of responsibility pushing her to work harder. The exhilaration of the previous gathering propelled her to draft a proposal outlining their previous discussions and potential next steps. With every word she typed, she could feel herself stepping deeper into leadership. She began reaching out to her colleagues individually, inviting them for coffee or casual check-ins. At first, it felt strange to put herself forward in such a personal way, but gradually it became a necessary action. She needed to understand their individual hopes and fears, to weave their stories into a collective narrative that would resonate strongly when it came time to confront the administration. Over cups of steaming coffee, she learned their frustrations, dreams, and aspirations in startling detail. Each story added another layer to their shared vision. With Emma, she learned about her struggle with student engagement and discovered new strategies bubbling quietly within her. Jake spoke of wanting to revolutionize the classroom experience, but he lacked the support to take the leap. As they shared their ideas, Sarah could feel their shared energy morph into something palpable. However, despite the growing bond with her colleagues, Frank's presence loomed larger each day. He was a constant reminder of the opposition they might face. Once, during lunch, Sarah found him seated alone, poring over a stack of paperwork. She hesitated before approaching him. He sensed her presence, looking up with his trademark skepticism. "What do you want, Sarah?" He grunted, the edge in his voice tangible. Taking a deep breath, she responded, "I want to understand your perspective. I think it might help us all." Frank raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "What's there to understand?" You think a few meetings are going to change anything? The administration has its agenda, and we're just cogs in the machine. Her stomach nodded at his dismissal of her efforts, but instead of retreating, something within her ignited. Cogs can become gears for change, she replied, a new firmness in her voice. We have the ability to influence our own narrative. What if we didn't simply accept our roles? What if we redefined them? A flicker of interest crossed Frank's face, but just as quickly it was tempered by a scowl. Dreamers don't last long in this profession, Sarah. You'll see. His words stung, but they also fueled her determination. Was he right? Or could she inspire enough belief in others to change the narrative? She began to recognize the monumental responsibility unfolding before her. It wasn't just about rallying her colleagues, it was about transforming her own limitations into strengths, confronting fear with resolve. As she sat down to refine the proposal later that week, she realized she needed to prepare for the next inevitable confrontation with Frank, to meet him head-to-head in the arena of ideas. In the back of her mind, a quiet dread settled. The administration's indifference was a gaping chasm beneath her feet, and she stood on the precipice. What would happen when they reached out? What if they were met with hostility instead of understanding? Sarah understood that the vision she was beginning to solidify would not materialize without resistance, yet she longed for the camaraderie she sensed was finally on the horizon. With each draft and discussion, Sarah was morphing into a leader fashioned from resolve and action. She reminded herself of her initial desire to teach, to make a difference, and she found that same spark of passion branching out into her newer role as an advocate for change. But would that passion withstand the scrutiny of those in power? The question haunted her as she prepared for the next step, leaving her both excited and terrified. Confrontation was imminent, and Sarah understood that the time had come to face not just Frank's skepticism but the systemic challenges ahead. In this complex web of human dynamics and unforeseen consequences, would she manage to hold on to her newfound strength, or would the doubt seep in, cracking her resolve when it mattered most? Each morning became a rite of passage for Sarah. With the proposal in hand and an emerging strategy developing in her mind, she began refining her vision. The goal was not merely to speak, but to construct an engaging narrative that would reach hearts and minds. She had to frame their story as one of empowerment rather than victimhood, turning potential apathy into inspiration. Her meetings with colleagues provided unrivaled insight into this collective narrative. With every discussion, Sarah could sense an accumulation of potential and almost electric anticipation brewing among them. Each story, each shared concern, became a thread weaving a tapestry of hope that she envisioned could offer support against the indifference of the administration. Nevertheless, the more vibrant her vision grew, the darker Frank's skepticism loomed. This tension forged an iron resolve within her. The dread that had settled over her like a weight began to turn into a focused determination. She was no longer merely contemplating confrontation, she was actively strategizing for it, orchestrating her words into weapons. Leadership was not about avoiding conflict but embracing it as a pathway for growth. However, a question gnawed at her as she prepared for these inevitable clashes. What if she faltered? The thought gripped her with an urgency that clarified her objectives. It wasn't just about being heard, it was about being understood and accepted. She began practicing her delivery, rehearsing how to frame their ideas, carefully articulating the dream of revolutionizing their educational landscape. On a cool Tuesday morning, Sarah gathered her colleagues, each willing to contribute their thoughts, anxieties, and aspirations. She felt a collective breathing, an almost unvoiced agreement lingering in the air. They could transform their whispered dreams into a powerful declaration. As they articulated their desires for change, Sarah took notes, ensuring she captured not just their words but the essence of their hopes. The afternoon approached, and it was time to invite Frank to a conversation, an act that felt monumental but also very real. She wrestled with how to present herself, confident or conciliatory. Each strategy held weight in her mind, creating a tug-of-war within her. But she understood that uncertainty would be her worst enemy. In the warmth of the staff lounge, Sarah found Frank engrossed in paperwork once more. She approached with a mix of trepidation and resolve, hoping for an opening. "Frank, she began, her voice steady, "I wanted to talk to you about our proposal. I think it's important we align on this." He lifted his gaze, judgment flickering across his features, and said, "What is there to align? Dreamers crafting delusions." Her heart raced, but she pressed on. "We have unique insights that could change our environment for the better. If we don't advocate for ourselves, who will?" For a brief moment, Frank hesitated, his brow furrowing. Was there a hint of curiosity? The silence stretched painfully. "You think your little meetings will matter? But what if they could?" Sarah asserted. "What if we stood together to advocate for change? I'm reaching out not just to convince you but to involve you, to make you a part of this journey. Your experience could guide us." His expression softened, just a trace. Instead of retreating, she held her ground, allowing the weight of her message to sink in. She could feel a shift in the atmosphere, her voice rising above the doubt, gathering strength from within. However, the fleeting moment of connection was rendered precarious when the door swung open and a more senior colleague stepped in, reminding her of the hierarchy looming overhead. Frank's eyes shifted as he exchanged pleasantries, and Sarah's heart began to sink, the moment evaporating. That encounter solidified her realization: she would not change minds or systems overnight. However, she also recognized that fostering genuine dialogue was a crucial step towards cultivating resilience within herself and her colleagues. As she left the staff lounge, a juxtaposition of excitement and frustration twisted within her. There was a battle surface emerging, a place where ideas would collide and reshape the status quo. Each encounter would be a measure of her growth and resilience. In the back of her mind, she calculated risks: how far could she push Frank, the administration, and even herself before she broke. She had glimpsed her own strength, but looming challenges begged the question: what would happen when she tested her limits? As the week progressed, Sarah adjusted her sails, feeling the tides of her resolve shift. She needed to prepare intensely for the next time they met. More than a simple discussion, she needed to wield her aspirations like a sword, poised for impact. Time was drawing ever closer for the confrontation that would define not only her path but also the future of her colleagues. Amid the whirlwind, one thing remained clear: the moment of truth loomed right before her, and her destiny was intertwined with the choices she would soon have to make. Would she embrace the risk of courage, or would she retreat into the shadows of doubt? The following week unfurled with the weight of possibility and anxiety pressing down on Sarah. Each day was like standing on the precipice, the wind of change whipping around her, both exhilarating and terrifying. It was a reality she had to face, and instead of retreating into familiar comfort, she chose to lean into the discomfort, watching it transform her resolve. Determined to sharpen her approach, Sarah expanded her research, diving deep into proven strategies that could bolster her argument against Frank. She scoured academic journals, combed through case studies, and even attended workshops during her free time. Each piece of knowledge felt like an arrow in her quiver, ready to be unleashed. She discovered nuances in leadership theory, strategic communication, and approaches to negotiating conflict that gave her a profound sense of empowerment. The more she learned, the sharper her confidence became, but one question remained lodged in her mind: could she apply this knowledge in the heat of confrontation? As the days passed, the anticipation for her next encounter with Frank burgeoned. Anxiety twisted in her stomach, but she recognized it as a natural indicator of growth, a signal that she was approaching the edge of her comfort zone. Each time she practiced in front of the mirror, she felt her delivery grow more effortless, the conviction in her words strengthening. She envisioned standing firm, parrying his skepticism with facts and passion. On the afternoon of their scheduled meeting, Sarah meticulously prepared herself. She chose her outfit with intention, a blend of professionalism and approachability, a visual cue to both herself and Frank that she meant business. As she walked to his office, she could feel her pulse quicken, the duality of fear and excitement surging within her. Today is just another conversation, she told herself, despite the internal war. You are simply presenting a different perspective. Frank's office door stood partially ajar, and she knocked lightly before stepping in, allowing the tension to circle around her like a charged atmosphere. "Frank, thanks for agreeing to meet with me," she said, striving for steadiness in her voice that he barely looked up, distracted by the clutter of papers sprawled across his desk. "Let us get this over with," he replied curtly. With that, she launched into her prepared points, framing their proposal not as a distant dream but as strategic improvements backed by tangible success metrics. She watched Frank's expressions closely, reading the subtle shifts in his demeanor. For brief moments, she caught flickers of intrigue in his eyes, but like shadows, they were quickly obscured by skepticism. "What makes you think those numbers are relevant here?" he interjected, pushing back, but Sarah was ready for it. "They're not just numbers. They represent a shift, passion, and the willingness to innovate," she replied, her voice steadying. "If we embrace these changes, we could cultivate an environment that nurtures student success instead of stifling it." As she spoke, the knot in her stomach began to untangle. Each assertion she made was met with resistance, but she was undeterred, her strategy crystallizing. Frank's interruptions became less pronounced, as if her words were chipping away at his fortress of doubt. And then, it happened. In the middle of her explanation regarding professional development for their staff, he paused, set down his pen, and looked up at her fully. "You really believe in this, don't you?" Her heart raced at this unexpected vulnerability, a chink in his communication armor. "I do, Frank. I believe it's time we advocate for ourselves. You have the experience to help guide this change. Together, we could lead our team into a new era." The air was thick with anticipation, the stakes higher than before. Sarah was aware that this was a pivotal moment, one that could crystallize her growth in leadership or lead to an unexpected backlash. Before he responded, footsteps echoed in the hallway, a reminder of their surroundings and the ever-present hierarchy that weighed heavily over them. He opened his mouth, but the hesitation had returned, a dance of contemplation crossed his features. Would he lean into this connection, or withdraw back into the safety of cynicism? The silence grew heavy, and Sarah knew she had reached a turning point. The risk she had embraced felt palpable now, fear mingling with hope. Are we going to change the narrative, or not? She thought, desperate for movement, for growth, for transformation. As the bell tolled for the meeting's conclusion, Sarah understood that she had opened a door, but whether it would lead to collective progress remained uncertain. The question reverberated through her mind: how much further could she push, and what would eventually break? Each choice, all the small steps she had taken, had culminated in this very moment, the chance to transcend the pain of past failures. It was time to find out just how far she could go. With determination fueling her, she exhaled and prepared to rise above the uncertainty, unsure yet hopeful about what lay ahead. Would this be the tipping point that would unleash change, or would it lead her back into the shadows? The silence in Frank's office hung like a suffocating blanket. Time felt suspended, allowing Sarah to confront the unraveling threads of her thoughts. The stakes were high, yet something within her surged, a mix of adrenaline and newfound clarity. She had invested everything into this moment, and finally, she could feel the contours of a breakthrough beginning to take shape. "Frank," she began again, her voice beneath the weight of his scrutiny. "This isn't just about numbers or trends. It's about creating a culture where we innovate and thrive. If we can align our goals with our values, we can unlock potential not just among our students but within ourselves as educators." He shifted slightly, his body language no longer firmly closed off but cautiously inquisitive. "You really believe that we can achieve that?" he asked, a genuine question laced with disbelief. "Absolutely," she replied, feeling a spark ignite within her. "It's not going to be easy," and she hesitated briefly, weighing the consequences of her next words. "It requires all of us to embrace discomfort. But I've seen it work. Change doesn't grow in harmony, it flourishes in the clash of new ideas." She watched him carefully as he processed her statement. The tension morphed into a sparring match of silent contemplation, where intellect met self-preservation. And for the first time, Sarah dared to confront the deeper complexities of their conversation. She leaned in slightly, allowing vulnerability to seep into her assertiveness. "Frank, what's truly holding you back?" The question startled him, and she noted the flicker of surprise in his eyes, quickly replaced with a guarded expression. It was a risk, but it was time for honesty to unearth the layers of fear that bound him. Just as she had confronted her own doubts, she was ready to ask him to do the same. "That's a rather personal inquiry," he replied with a defensive edge, but she could tell there was more beneath the surface. "I know it is," she continued softly, "but we can't move forward without addressing what's in our way. We don't have to align on everything, but engaging in this dialogue could unearth something powerful." A moment of silence stretched, and Sarah felt the pulse of her own heart echoing in her ears. Finally, Frank let out a sigh, running a hand through his hair, signaling an unraveling of his tightly wound demeanor. "Fine, but it's not easy," he trailed off, his voice softer now. The crack in Frank's armor felt like a momentous breakthrough for both of them. It unleashed an energy that ignited the conversation, pulling them through the uncertain shadows of past failures into a realm of potential. She sensed they were skirting around transformative territory. As Frank spoke, revealing buried apprehensions, concerns about accountability, fear of judgment from superiors. Sarah absorbed each word. Facing his vulnerabilities mirrored her own journey, providing a sturdy foundation for change. The dialogue unfurled, unlocking frameworks for mutual understanding and alliance building. They brainstormed strategies, twinning their vision of a progressive workplace that flourished on creativity and collaboration. Each shared insight of their strengths deepened the connection, evolving the discourse from mere proposal to a co-creation of purpose. By the time their meeting concluded, Sarah felt transcendent, bolstered by the notion that they had crossed a threshold toward change. She stepped into the hallway, the cacophony around her fading as her mind whirled with reflections on her own evolution. She had ventured beyond the role of a passive participant, she was actively sculpting the future she envisioned, and yet, doubt loomed. Would Frank carry this momentum and advocate for her ideas with genuine commitment? Would he champion their shared vision amid the pervasive resistance in their environment? The questions rattled in her mind, demanding answers. That night, as she prepared for bed, Sarah reviewed the day's developments, tracing her trajectory with both pride and trepidation. Just as her journey had begun with an engine of uncertainty, it seemed that transformation often danced hand in hand with doubt. As she closed her eyes, the echoes of unfinished dialogues lingered. It struck her, confronting such dilemmas could ultimately reveal strengths she had yet to discover. But there was another challenge that awaited just beyond the horizon, one that could either solidify her leadership or threaten her newfound resolve. What happens when the pressure mounts? She wondered, anticipation surging through her. The next chapter of her life was on the brink, and she felt invigorated by the potential of what was to come. The morning sun streamed through Sarah's window, energizing her determination as she rose to face a significant day ahead. The palpable tension in the air nudged at her thoughts. Today, she would meet with Frank again, this time to discuss presenting their ideas to the broader educational board. The thought both excited and terrified her. It was a step that could either validate their collaborative effort or expose the fragile foundation they had just begun to construct. As Sarah prepared for the meeting, she couldn't shake a sense of urgency lurking beneath her confidence. Could she truly persuade the board to embrace their vision, or would they revert to the comfort of traditional practices? The stakes were higher than ever, and she worried the weight of resistance from a complacent institution would crush their fledgling ambitions. Dressed in a sharp blazer that reflected both professionalism and her unyielding spirit, Sarah reviewed her notes. Each bullet point listed strategies for innovation and inclusivity. Yet, doubt seeped into her preparations. She questioned her readiness to counter the arguments she could anticipate from board members, voices of authority that had historically steered conversations back toward outdated methods of education. Arriving at the office, she spotted Frank, who was waiting with a stack of reports clutched in his hands, his usual pre-meeting ritual. His expression conveyed his own struggle between optimism and fear. She approached him, catching the hesitant glimmer in his eyes. "Ready?" she ventured, testing the waters of his enthusiasm. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, but the tension in his voice echoed her feelings. The boardroom felt imposing as they entered, a stark contrast to the intimate office conversations they had shared. Sarah's heartbeat quickened, a cacophony of anxiety and excitement flooded her senses. This was a crucial moment, one that could either cement her budding leadership or expose her uncertainties. The meeting commenced, and after the initial pleasantries, the floor was theirs to navigate. Every word Sarah uttered opened up possibilities, but the resistance she feared surfaced quickly. An older board member leaned forward, sharp eyes narrowing, "But how will you handle dissent? This all sounds wonderful, but we can't forget established protocols." Sarah felt the room draw inward, the tension palpable. She exchanged a glance with Frank, who gave a subtle nod of encouragement. Drawing in a deep breath, she replied, "Innovation requires us to challenge protocols when they hinder growth. By inviting dissent, we cultivate a culture that values diverse perspectives, leading to solutions we might not have previously considered." A ripple of murmurs echoed through the room as she continued, dissecting the advantages of their ideas. Each slide she presented displayed not just plans but a blueprint for a thriving educational ecosystem. Sarah's confidence surged. She reveled in the engagement she was fostering, yet, amidst the enthusiasm, a familiar voice cut through her momentum. Another board member, expressive in his skepticism, raised his brow. "And what happens when parents resist these changes? You're asking us to take a leap of faith based on what, exactly?" Each question felt like a direct challenge to her authority, a test of her commitment to the vision. The polite facade of the room began crumbling, revealing a dichotomy between their innovatory aspirations and ingrained skepticism. Sarah's pulse perceptibly quickened as she contemplated her response, grappling with her own insecurities. Change is never without its detractors, she acknowledged, focusing her energy on articulating a response grounded in truth. "What we need is a strategy to involve parents early and transparently in the process. Education is a partnership, and we can create a framework to nurture understanding and adaptability." Their eyes scrutinized her, searching for cracks in her resolve. It was time for her to confront her own doubts, to own her authority amidst adversity. The session dug deeper into a debate, each argument forging a shared path through previously uncharted territories of confrontation. As the meeting progressed, an unexpected idea began to form within Sarah's mind, a possibility that could change the dynamics of resistance entirely. Could they design a pilot program showcasing their concepts, allowing for real-time evaluation? Her desire to steer the conversation dissolved into action as she stepped forward, ready to propose this transformative approach. The responses that followed were a mix of skepticism and intrigue. Would this pilot become an anchor for their ideas, or a mounting pressure that further endangered their vision? As she dissected the board's reactions, Sarah found herself at a new crossroads. The chance to lead the charge against complacency lay directly before her. With a sense of anticipation mingled with dread, Sarah felt the weight of their journey press upon her shoulders. The pressure was mounting, and her next move could define not only her career but the very culture of innovation they dreamed of creating. As she closed the meeting, her mind raced with implications of both triumph and challenge. How far was she willing to go to see her vision realized? In that fleeting moment of resolve, Sarah understood, the true test of leadership wasn't simply about winning others over, but about confronting the discomfort buried deep within herself. What would she discover when weighed against the realities of change? The board meeting had come and gone, a whirlwind of fiery exchanges and unyielding doubts. For Sarah, the aftermath hung in the air like a heavy fog. Each moment replayed in her mind, where her words had resonated and where they had faltered. Yet, amidst the lingering uncertainties, she grasped one undeniable truth: she had stepped beyond the fragility of mere participation into the realm of genuine leadership. The days that followed were marked by an invigorated sense of purpose. With Frank now standing by her side as a reluctant partner, they saw the potential for a new kind of advocacy. He had shifted, albeit slowly, embracing the idea of being part of the solution rather than lamenting the problems. This developing partnership infused Sarah with hope. She could feel the foundations of their collective vision gaining traction. At their next staff meeting, Sarah presented the feedback from the board, channeling her newfound confidence into a rallying cry for her colleagues. "We have a chance," she began, her voice steady, "to pilot this program. Our vision isn't just a dream, it's a path forward for our students and our community." The atmosphere crackled with a sense of possibility, as teachers leaned in, engaging with the ideas, their skepticism slowly fading into an undeniable momentum. Each conversation strengthened her resolve, showcasing the growth she had cultivated over time. Colleagues shared not just their concerns but their enthusiasm, and barriers began to dissolve. Sarah was no longer a passive participant, she had become a catalyst for transformation. In turn, her leadership was recognized beyond the faculty. The administration could no longer overlook the wave of support gathering momentum behind her. As the weeks rolled on, Sarah crafted the proposal for the pilot program with meticulous care, soaking in diverse perspectives. Each revision was a reflection of their evolving dialogue, an embodiment of the strength she now wielded. She infused the program with elements addressing equity, extracurricular opportunities, and holistic student support, filling each section with the colors of hope and possibility. The moment of truth arrived when she and Frank presented the final proposal to the administration for approval. Stepping into the conference room, Sarah felt the weight of anticipation and pressure coalesce. But this time, she wasn't just presenting a plan, she was embodying the very essence of leadership she had fought so hard to claim. The administration posed questions, their skepticism palpable, but Sarah remained anchored in her conviction. This program represents a collective effort, our chance to redefine what education can be for our students and our community, she articulated passionately. It's not about avoiding discomfort, it's about embracing it to forge paths we have yet to explore. By the time they concluded the meeting, silence hovered in the room, but the tension felt different, an amalgamation of contemplation and acknowledgement. As she exited, Frank nudged her shoulder with an encouraging smile. They had planted a seed, and now they could only wait for it to take root. Weeks passed, and Sarah moved through the school halls with a newfound confidence that positively impacted her interactions. Her colleagues approached her not just for ideas but for advice and inspiration. Their inquiry led to a tangible camaraderie, solidifying the bonds that had once hung by a thread. One afternoon, she received an email from the administration. Subject: Approval of Pilot Program. Her heart raced as she opened it, each paragraph thick with validation and excitement. At that moment, the world felt as if it had unlocked a new trajectory for her career, her spirit soaring and buoyant. Later that week, she stood before her class, the laughter of her students filling the air, and for the first time in a long time, she felt unwavering confidence radiating from her core. She had become an advocate, a protector, and a catalyst for change, not just for her students but for herself. Sarah realized she had conquered the daunting push to embrace responsibility, transforming uncertainty into empowerment. The weight of her past struggles no longer burdened her but propelled her forward. After months of battling doubt and carving paths through adversity, Sarah now stood at the precipice of a remarkable transformation. She had reclaimed her spirit, becoming the fearless advocate her students needed. She achieved not only professional integrity but personal fulfillment, acknowledging her growth while embracing the role of a changemaker. The echoes of doubt faded into the distance, replaced by the unwavering belief that came from the realization of her own strength. Now, the future held endless possibilities filled with challenges yet glowing with promise. This pivotal moment in Sarah's journey serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing steadfast amid uncertainty. Sometimes, it's the very act of facing our fears that reveals profound inner strength, reshaping not just our careers, but our lives altogether. If you found Sarah's transformation inspiring, you need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes all the difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey, what resonated with you, and don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.